Play out down the home stretch. The Supreme Court unanimously ruling today that Colorado or any other state cannot kick Donald Trump off its ballot. The Republican frontrunner trying to link the decision directly to the Oval Office, claiming President Biden is to blame.
President Biden, number one, stop weaponization. Fight your fight yourself.
Now, the decision comes on a day in which we also learned how the Biden campaign plans to play it down the home stretch. They'll focus on freedom. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, happy Monday. Here we are, and here we go. Come on in, hanging out with us today, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday and NewsNation political editor. Did you watch it?
I did.
Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official. Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Johanna Mosca, NewsNation contributor, former Obama official as well. Hello to you all.
Hello.
Hello. You had a busy day yesterday.
Yes, I did, but we survived. I was just doing my best Blake Berman imitation. I think we made it through.
So, Jason Miller coming on up here in the show momentarily. Hot mic with Mick. You've got some thoughts about the White House and drug usage.
We're talking about drugs today.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, the Rolling Stone article.
Pro or con?
I said I'd take him up on talking about
Chris
drugs.
is going to break down what we saw with polling over the weekend, but it struck me where we begin, of course, with this Supreme Court ruling 9-0 in favor, basically saying you cannot keep a presidential candidate, in this case Donald Trump, off the ballot. Now we also know, Chris, that the Biden campaign down the home stretch is going to be making the freedom argument. Long article. I don't know if you guys saw this, New York Magazine. You're already squinting. Giving me some side eye on this. Nervous tick. By November, this is according to Mike Donnellan, a senior advisor to President Biden, quote, the focus will become overwhelming on democracy. I think the biggest images in people's minds are going to be January 6th, Chris.
Well, first, let me say, thank goodness that the Supreme Court was able to speak unanimously on this case. This is a step in the right direction. Whether you think Donald Trump, whether you think the 14th Amendment is self-executing, or whether you agree or disagree with the verdict, that the decision was unanimous is really good and really encouraging that we're going to be able to get through what will be a very choppy, very hairy election season in the courts with some confidence, and that's a good thing. As for Joe Biden talking about democracy and freedom, look, if this election is about Joe Biden, he will lose. If this election is about Donald Trump, Joe Biden will win. It's really that simple. And Joe Biden has to do everything he can to make this not a referendum on Joe Biden, but a question of whether you want Donald Trump. A choice election, not a referendum. And the way you do it is say that Donald Trump is kooky.
Do you really think, though, people that are on the cusp of voting for him is going to vote for him because of January 6th? I just feel like people are past that.
I don't know why anyone would be past January 6th. I mean, this is the outrageous thing. Look, I think the Supreme Court had to do what they did because we're in a situation where you would have set up such an ugly precedent. There has been no conviction. But January 6th was a blight on our country. It was appalling. And we've got more than 1,200 people who have been charged. Some of them are felony convictions. They can't vote in their state. And yet the man who was behind it is going to be the Republican nominee. I don't think we're behind January 6th.
Do you think that people are going to switch their vote because
No, I think that women in the suburbs are going to think about whether they want to put that amount of power in Donald Trump's hands, whether we make it about freedom or not. That and choice, I think, give the Democrats
Nick,
a
we
strong upper hand.
We saw one example of democracy today, right? You can't just kick someone off the ballot, and then this article drops. And
this is the right decision for the court. We've talked about this before. There's a chance they do a 9-0 decision on this, allowing Trump on the ballot, by the way they went back to the decisions about term limits and essentially said states can't tell the federal government who can stand for federal office. That was the basis here, okay? 9-0. Nice job. There's another case coming down the pipe on immunity, and there's a really good chance that the Supreme Court will come out 9-0 against Donald Trump on that.
Do you think that could be unanimous?
I absolutely think it. In fact, I expect it to be the exact same thing, a per curiam decision, okay, which comes down without anybody's name attached to it, 9-0.
Mulvaney is right. Mulvaney is right.
We've talked about the yin and yang of this in a way to reestablish the court's legitimacy in the eyes of most of the American public.
Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor, come on in. in. What about it that what Mick floats, Chris agrees with, that this is just round 1 of 2 and round 2 is going to be the 180?
Could be very well true. And I mean, when you look at the Supreme Court and you say, oh my gosh, it's so political, they're going to do anything to protect Donald Trump. I mean, it's interesting they took up these 2 cases that could have the opposite effects, right? This was obviously a win for Donald Trump. Not surprisingly, we heard the arguments. We heard the hesitation even from liberal justices, the idea that states should be able to determine who is on the ballot or not. That would create absolute chaos. One state saying Donald Trump's disqualified, another saying he's fine. But when it comes to the immunity issue, I agree that there is a strong possibility they will all say that a president does not have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. I do believe there is a very specific issue that they may have a debate on in terms of whether or not the former president was acting within the scope of his duties. They might actually remand that issue back to the lower court that would be decided at trial. But other than that, I don't really see a blanket immunity for the former president.
So clearly they got this out there today, Jesse, before Super Tuesday, right? A big political moment in the primary. The next case, the immunity case, is the week of April 22nd. So we're still talking, what is that, 6 weeks from now? When do you expect them to give that answer, to give that decision?
Blake, that's a great question, because a lot of us are wondering, would they issue a decision by June and by the end of their recess, which would effectively put the prosecution of Donald Trump on the federal election interference case. It would send it into chaos. It would make it so that trial doesn't really happen. And if the court could be criticized, right? They come out so quickly on this issue of the 14th Amendment, but when it comes to the issue of immunity, they're pushing the ball down the road. Why? That's a fair question. That's a fair criticism. I don't have a great answer. You could say maybe because this was an electoral issue. This was about the election. It was right before Super Tuesday. Okay. Both sides were saying they needed an answer quickly, but it's a fair criticism.
All right, Jesse, hang on here for a second. Joining us now, Jason Miller, senior advisor to President Trump, senior advisor to the campaign, frequent guest here on the Hill, and appreciate your time as always, Jason. Thanks for coming on back. So obviously 2 different things, right? The ruling today that went in the president's favor, but I wonder what you think, what goes through your mind when you listen to some of the conversation, which is, well, maybe round 2 could work the other way.
Well, not being a lawyer and not looking to make my legal debut on NewsNation, no offense, I would say that obviously very much liked today's ruling. I think this was a right decision. I think what Chris was saying made a great point. It would have been chaos all across the country if you had different states doing this, and I think it could have it just would have been very ugly and not very good. I think there's a broader takeaway today that when you look at the Biden camp, they're saying their number one issue is democracy, and they still stick by that. But when you look at all the polling, it shows it's only a 3 or 4 point gap between President Trump and President Biden on the issue of democracy. And that's because I think people are starting to get it, that the Biden folks are starting to weaponize government, weaponize the ballot access system, even weaponizing the Department of Justice.
How can you make the argument, Jason, some would ask, how can you make the argument that you're on the right side of that issue, especially after what we witnessed at the end of President Trump's presidency?
I'd say simply with regard to the election, let the people decide who they want to be their next president. And President Trump had similar comments to that effect earlier today when he gave remarks at Mar-a-Lago and he said, hey, Joe, fight your own fights. Quit trying to hide behind ballot access measures or weaponizing your DOJ. Fight your own fights. And I think that's what people want. And that's why the polls, even with all the legal issues out there, consistently show President Trump well ahead of Joe Biden.
President Trump over the weekend in Greensboro, North Carolina. I want to play something that he said real quick and get your reaction on the other side.
Biden's conduct on our border is by any definition a conspiracy to overthrow the United States of America.
Conspiracy to overthrow the United States of America. Is he setting up there, Jason, the possibility that if Donald Trump gets back into office, that there could be legal consequences coming President Biden's way in a Trump administration because of what happened on the border?
Well, I think that's a bit of a silly argument if it's one that you're making in full force. All you have to do is look back at the 4 years
I'm just asking
Trump
because
was in. But I'm saying look at the first 4 years that President Trump was in the White House, and there was no retribution or going after political opponents. It's actually the Democrats who do that, Blake. But when you talk about President Trump and the remarks in North Carolina, I think he's making very provocative comments, quite frankly, to try to get people's attention to what's going on. You have all these illegals coming into the country, could be well over 9, 10, 11 million, could be even more. And this is a real problem. We see the migrant crime. We see what happened to Laken Riley. We see what's happened to every community across the country. And if we don't do something about this, it's going to tear us apart.
Super Tuesday tomorrow, as you know, Jason, 12:15, the magic number for delegates. The campaign had argued that you should have this wrapped up by March 19th, so not this Tuesday, but a couple Tuesdays from now. When do you expect President Trump to hit that number? Is that still the date?
Well, it could be earlier. If you literally just take the polling and extrapolate that out, President Trump should finish Super Tuesday with a massive delegate avalanche. And again, this avalanche is going to be massive tomorrow. President Trump will be probably over 1,000, just under 1,100 delegates. Of course, you need 1,215. Nikki Haley will be under 100. And so probably it'll be March 12th, a week later. I can't really see it going to the 19th, but it could be a little bit close, but probably the 12th. But here's the thing, especially with the Supreme Court ruling out of the way, which basically the only reason Nikki Haley was hanging around in this race is because she thinks some magical ice cream truck is going to come and hit President Trump. That's not the case. The court has ruled for him to be on the ballot. Nikki Haley's got to get out of this race. There's no pathway to victory, not even a single state that she's going to win.
Jason Miller, we'll leave it there, senior advisor to President Trump and the campaign. Appreciate the time, as always. We'll talk to you again soon, Jason.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. All right. Now, meantime, to the Supreme Court. Potentially, it could be involved in yet another case, this one on the border. Over the weekend, a federal appeals court overruled a lower court decision, which means that in the state of Texas, they could soon start arresting illegal immigrants within their state lines. This celebrated by the Texas Governor Greg Abbott, as it is the latest case of him going head-to-head with the Biden administration. Jesse, the Justice Department jumped in on this. Who's going to win this one?
So putting aside the politics and what you want to see happen with the border, from a legal point of view, I don't see it having much standing, right? I think that this is a clear example of the federal government versus the state government. The federal government has the authority with regard to immigration, and you can't necessarily have state actors doing the bidding of the federal government. They can't just say usurp federal immigration law. So I don't really see this having much success, as it makes its way through the appeals. Yes, they were granted a bit of a reprieve right here, but I don't think it's actually going to be upheld, the ability of state actors to arrest.
Jesse Weber, well, do you have one for Jesse? Or?
Jesse, yeah, real quick, it's Mick. Does that change if the state is enforcing the federal law? I absolutely agree with you if you're going to say that the state can't enforce one law that's in opposition to a federal law. But what if the state has simply tried to enforce the federal law? Do you see a gray area in that area or not?
It's a good analysis, right? I mean, if there is a federal law in the books and the states are acting in furtherance of that, sure, but not when they're creating their own kind of framework in terms of how they can arrest certain people and detain certain people and deport certain people. That is entering an area that they don't have the authority to enter into.
All right, Jesse, we'll leave it there. We'll talk to you again soon. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Jesse, thank you.
Thanks,
Real quick, around the table, what'd you hear from Jason Miller there?
Oh, goodness. I don't know how that guy can come on with a straight face. Poor Jason. He's got a number of things on his docket. I think the problem for the Trump campaign is that they need suburban women. And they continue to put up this narrative that everything's okay. We're just going to trust the dear leader. And you have people like Jason Miller, who's paid prostitutes as the spokesperson, has allegedly paid prostitutes as the spokesperson. No, like, legitimately, this is the problem. I would be happy to have his explanation of why he said his wife was happy about having an wedlock birth.
I don't want to get into the personal.
But it is true. This is the problem that suburban women have with Donald Trump and with the orbit he surrounds himself with.
First off, we care about the politics, not the personal. And so
it matters to suburban women.
I'm happy to move away from hookers if you want me to.
I don't want to make it personal.
Yeah, that's fine. Look, anytime,
nobody cares about what.
Switch gears for a second. Talk about this freedom thing, because we always talk about it at the show when the Democrats give the Republicans advice and the Republicans give Democrats advice, and we always laugh. It's always nice to see what the other side tells us what to do on this freedom thing, right? That we talked about. There's a line here from David Axelrod. Last time I checked, a pretty good Democrat. He says, "I'm pretty certain in Scranton they're not sitting around the dinner table talking about democracy every night.
Right.
That, I think, is the risk that the Biden team runs here against Trump, is they're going to make an issue where not only does Biden not really winning the issue, it's roughly an even polling on who's better for democracy, but it's also the type of thing that nobody cares about. No one cares about democracy. They do care about democracy, but they don't think it's nearly as at risk as many Democrats do.
That's what I was saying about the January 6th. I mean, there's more things that they should be hitting on, whether it's inflation or groceries or whatever, what they're doing for the border, not going back to January 6th, because they're not going to get new voters politically.
But people care about hypocrisy.
Joe Biden's problem is not his message. He does not have a messaging problem. He has a messenger problem. And the situation that he's in is Democrats keep saying, well, say this, we'll say that. How come you're not talking more about this? How come you're not talking more about that? Joe Biden's problem is that he's not getting credit for improvements in the economy. He's not getting credit for good things that are happening on his watch, because when people look at him, they think he's extraordinarily old.
I was with a former DNC chairman this past week, and he said, look, the only problem with Biden is he's not delivering the message.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not a message problem. It's a messenger problem.
It's a messenger problem.
Okay, coming up, as we focus on the policies and the politics, more on the border crisis. Did you see this headline and what they're doing in the state of Georgia? Some lawmakers want police to arrest anyone who might be in the country illegally. If there's a probable cause, you think they're here illegally, should you arrest? I'll talk about it live with Mike Collins, the Republican congressman from Georgia, and how he's responding to the Laken Riley murder. Plus, the president and Donald Trump have had a series of blunders for all to see, and they will likely face each other in November. So exactly how confident are Americans in their mental fitness? How confident are they, Chris?
I mean, I don't know how confident I am in mine to get through the breakdown. So I wouldn't mind to say. We'll see whether I can figure it out.
Chris breaks it down. Other side of the break, you're watching The Hill. Stay with us here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back. Concerns about the mental ability of both front runners now back front and center following recent gaffes by both President Biden and former President Trump.
And Putin, has so little respect for Obama that he's starting to throw around the nuclear word today. You heard that, nuclear. He's starting to talk nuclear weapons today.
We're going to join with our friends in Jordan and others in providing airdrops of additional food and supplies into Ukraine, and seek to continue to open up other avenues into Ukraine.
Well, polling clearly shows there are concerns about whether both are too old. But how the questions are asked can also play a major part in how voters look at the issue, or at least how we get the numbers on the issue. Steyerwalt here to break it all down. Chris?
I just feel great after watching that.
You feel refreshed?
I don't know about you, but I just feel like I'm ready. Okay, so here's the thing. This is kind of about age and the election, but it's just, and I promise I'll keep it short, but I want to talk to you about polling. I want to talk to you. I don't know why I did the Bill Clinton tiny thumb there, but I want to talk to you about polling and how polling is weird. So look at this poll, this first poll. Okay, too old to be effective to be president. This is part of the poll that made Democrats all want to throw themselves off of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge over the weekend. Way too old. This is Biden 73% to 42% Trump. Okay. Fine. Now, look at this poll from the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago. Much closer, only a 10-point gap on the two, and majorities say both, right? So you would look at that and you would say, what's the deal? What's the deal? Now, look, I'm not going to make you hear about probabilities, samples. I'm not going to make you hear about all of this stuff about polling, but I want you to see the power of how you word a question. So first, look at the question for the New York Times poll, which is, these are both high quality, excellent polls. First question, this candidate, Biden, Trump, whatever, is just too old to be an effective president. Compare that to the question, how confident are you that each of the following has the mental capacity to serve effectively as president? They're asking two very different questions. Now, this is interesting to me as a nerd, and I like to look at how prompts and surveys affect the outcomes when you do a poll. But it also gets to the issue. Yes, Joe Biden has a huge problem about his age. The problem about Donald Trump with voters isn't his age. It's that he's kooky, right? It's not the age part with Trump. It's the radical. It's he goes off. He gets nutty, right? It's not that they think he's too old. It's they think he's too wacky. and not predictable and stable enough. I tell you all of that to say, as we go through this year, as we go through this process, you're going to see people throwing polls around. They're going to talk about the polls. They're going to say, this poll proves this poll proves that. What's the truth? The truth is there's lies, damn lies, and statisticians. You've heard it before. Take these all with a grain of salt. Count on reliable pollsters and read the detail, or just watch us, and we'll read them for you.
Steyerwalt breaks it down. By the way, Sunday show this weekend, first go at it. Nikki Haley, what was your takeaway?
She won D.C. Congratulations. She did that. Way to go. I mean, look, it's really, for Nikki Haley, it's kind of a rough story because Super Tuesday tomorrow, the rules in all these states, Nikki Haley could win. She could get some delegates in Virginia. Okay. There's Vermont, I don't know. But because of all the rule changes that they put in place, if you get to 50%,
California's gone, Texas is gone.
Exactly. In a previous cycle, she would have had a good day Super Tuesday or a pretty good day Super Tuesday. It's going to be very tough.
All right, around the table real quick. Nikki Haley, no labels speculation. That's the potential third-party group that could put sort of like a coalition ticket together. Here's what she said, quote, "If I were to do no labels, that would require a Democratic vice president. I can't do what I want to do as president with a Democratic vice president." You're smirking, Mick. Is that her saying no, or is that her trying to lure them in a little?
No, it's her saying no for the wrong reason. Okay. No president is restricted in any way, shape, or form by their vice president. Okay. So this is a way to say, well, I don't want to do this because I don't want to have a Democrat vice president. She's not doing it because she's not a compromised candidate. She's a good right-wing conservative. She's pro-life, neoconservative, Tea Party governor. She's not the no labels sort of candidate. Now, there's a caveat to that. If No Labels has been lying to people for a year, and what they really are all about is simply being anti-Donald Trump, then they will look long and hard at Nikki Haley because she will pull Republican votes away from Donald Trump. But if they're still serious about offering somebody who can win, it's not Nikki Haley.
I'll get to you in a second, Johanna. Disclaimer, you are in Nikki Haley's orbit.
Right, but I just want to say that was the only time she said that about the Democrat vice president. She's consistently been saying she's a Republican, and that's why she's not running on No Labels. I just wanted to clarify.
That makes complete sense.
But she is a conservative, and I just don't know how. The thing that I did want to bring up that Mick and I talked about before the break was that she still raised $12 million in February after losing all of this. It's a ton of money, and it's still... So it is more than independents that want her.
Okay. And I would take issue with only one thing. No one will win under No Labels. We know that. It's stacked against you.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
He's the only one?
I don't think so. But I think Nikki Haley has the best chance out of a lot of people to actually draw that suburban woman who has left Trump. It's mostly going to be suburban women who have left Biden and left Trump.
Okay. All right. Programming note, by the way, for this Thursday, NewsNation will air special live coverage of the State of the Union. Starts Thursday, 8 o'clock Eastern, with a special edition of Cuomo. Look at
us. It's like we're in a buddy picture. It looks like I'm the grizzled veteran.
We're here.
We're here.
Did we just become best friends?
I think exactly.
We're going to be here.
Yeah. Second person pronoun. I got that. Yeah. Us.
Cuomo, 8 o'clock. We're doing special coverage right after Chris. You're going to want to watch us. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Watch some of us here.
And there were a lot of boys in that picture.
I know.
You're with us, though.
Exactly. We're here, and we're not in the picture.
Still much more ahead here on the Hill. Take a look at this headline from Rolling Stone. Trump's White House awash in speed and Xanax. Woohoo! What does Mick think? He was there. He served in the Trump administration. Hot Mic with Mick coming up. And she was killed by an illegal immigrant. The murder of Laken Riley has captured headlines across the United States. Now the state of Georgia wants restrictor laws, and the congressman who represents that district has just introduced a new bill. What he's introduced, what he's trying to get done. He'll speak to us on the other side of the break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. So is it a good first step, or does it need to go even further? The congressman who represents Athens, Georgia, has now introduced the Laken Riley Act, which would require ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to detain illegal immigrants who are charged with shoplifting. The illegal immigrant who is accused of murdering the 22-year-old University of Georgia student had been picked up for shoplifting and then was let go. Joining us now is the Georgia Congressman Mike Collins. Just introduced that legislation, represents that district of Athens, Georgia, and joins us once again here on the Hill. Congressman, thanks for being back with us. Appreciate the time, sir. The Laken Riley Act, tell us about it, and do you how much support do you think that you have behind this?
Well, it does three great things, and I appreciate you having me on. But to start out with, it does three things. First of all, it condemns the Biden administration in no uncertain terms for their failure at the border and their policies, which led to the murder of Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia, 2 weeks ago almost. The second thing it does is, you're exactly right. It lowers the threshold for local law enforcement to be able to call in ICE to detain these people when they commit these crimes. This fellow had actually committed crimes in New York City before he came to Athens, Georgia. And there's no telling where else he went. I'm sure they're not through turning over the rocks to see where all this guy's been. But we need to make sure that ICE steps in and detains these people. And the third thing that it does, it allows states to sue the Homeland Security when they don't do their job. And it makes federal court or federal judges step in and say, you need to go in and you need to pick up these people when they're not willing to do that. So it's a great bill. You're right, it's the first step, but it's going to go past that. It's going to pass the House.
How do you expect it? You say pass the House. The House is led by Republicans, but if you're going to put something in there condemning the president, I guess you aren't trying to get Democratic support, or? No,
I think that it's a clear failure. There is a failure on several different levels. The Biden administration is one of those levels, the federal level. But sure, it should pass overwhelmingly. I expect it to pass the Senate as well. This is something that needs to be in law. I'm sure you understand it. We're at war. We're at war at two different fronts right now. That southern border down there, but also these states and these cities around this country. We have got criminal activity being conducted by these illegal aliens all over the country. And it's not just in Athens, Georgia. And we need to be able to put some teeth into the law and strengthen it so that we can detain these people and deport them. Okay. So this is a good bill. I read, sir, that you invited Laken Riley's parents to the State of the Union address. I wonder if you've spoken with them and how that might have been received. I've spoken with them on several occasions. The moment of silence was actually what they wanted to be said about Laken, and we honored everything in that to their wishes. And sure, we've extended an invite to them if they would like to attend the State of the Union address to come and sit and be our guests. I think one of the biggest things they want to see, and I know they related to me, is if there's anything that we can do up here or do in Washington to help to make sure that no other family and no other parents have to go through what they've gone through, then they are behind it and they want to see that done. Congressman, real quick, headline in the Hill, Georgia State House passes bill allowing police to arrest anyone suspected of being in the country illegally. Do you have concerns that goes too far? No, I can't state it enough. Illegal activity and illegal aliens are creating crime across this country. And anything we can do to combat that, I am all for it. Got it. We'll leave it there, Congressman. Congressman Mike Collins, Athens, Georgia, represents the district of Laken Riley. We appreciate the time. Talk to you soon, sir. Thank you. I couldn't help but notice as I was speaking to the congressman, and second time in a couple weeks he's been on, so we thank him. You two were the Republicans were a bit disheartened. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's just first of all, I feel very sorry for Laken's family, and I understand where the congressman's trying to go in regards to helping his constituents, and this is a very serious issue. I think it will be very tough to get a bill that's attacking the president, one, and then also the states being able to sue
Whether that's constitutional.
Yeah, I don't think that would work. I do have to say, though, there could be like a really, really slim bill, which I think is really hard, where they already have to report if there's major crimes committed. Can you do it not just for burglary? It would have to be like the second level down of crimes.
I'm a big fan of messaging bills. I've done them. We've all done them in Congress, right? And I get it. The ones you introduce because you want to make a point, right?
Right.
And he's got to say he thinks it's going to pass. But if he legitimately thinks it's going to pass, that he needs to, that's not right. It's never going to happen, right?
Okay.
You just don't put something in saying that the president, I'm condemning the president, and then expect any Democrats to vote for it.
Well,
and to say on TV, I think it's going to pass the Senate. No, it's not.
And
Either it's a messaging bill or it's a real bill. It could be a good bill without that part about
the personal and the political. Nothing is going to bring their little girl back, and it's heart-wrenching. It's awful. I have to say, this scare tactic that it's illegal aliens, it is dangerous because that is not proven out in the data, and actually homicides are down, which is a good thing across major cities in the United States.
Statistically, that is the case.
It is. And it's awful for this family. You're never going to be able to change their reality.
But statistically, it's the case. You're absolutely right. You're actually less likely to have crime in the immigrant population than the endemic population. I get that. For this family, that is no help.
Oh, I agree.
This family, it was an illegal immigrant, and if he wasn't, he didn't hear, she would be alive.
You talk about seriousness in this town all the time.
Well, I mean, look, the Democrats believed that all they had to do was get rid of Donald Trump and they could fix immigration. Or it was easy for Democrats to believe. We won't put kids in cages anymore. We're going to be better. And then they said, oh, this is really hard and this is really complicated, right? And, you know, it's silly season all the time now. It's always election season. And we say that there are easy fixes or simple fixes to hard problems. But, for Democrats, the lesson about sanctuary cities and sanctuaryism and the belief that illegal immigration was a manufactured problem that was drummed up by Trump. Just because Trump exaggerated it, and just because it was exaggerated doesn't mean, and you can see the data again and again and again, that among Democrats and among independent voters, concerns over illegal immigration have gone up and up and up, and that is because every state is a border state now.
Okay. All right, coming up here on The Hill, live look at the White House, 1600 Penn, just down the road from us. Claims now about what was going on in the Trump administration involving drugs like Xanax, Ambien, other stuff going on. Article in the Rolling Stone. It got Mulvaney's attention today. Got a lot of folks' attention. What was going on inside of the Trump White House? Hot Mike with Mick on the other side of the break when The Hill returns. He's already
super chill.
After grueling trips to the border from two presidents, will anything get done to help solve the border crisis? And will Super Tuesday change the momentum or be the end of the road for Nikki Haley? Bill O'Reilly and Geraldo weigh in with Leland on Balance tonight, only on NewsNation. NewsNation's Marky Martin, weekdays on Morning in America.
Every day we have a shared mission of giving a voice to those who feel like they don't have a voice. And I think at NewsNation we've done a really great job at championing those stories. Morning news shouldn't be this stiff, rigid thing. It should be a conversation. That's what I go for.
Morning in America, starting at 6/5 Central, followed by NewsNation Live. To find NewsNation, go to joinnn.com.
Here's a fun fact for you. The average chameleon can point their eyes in two different directions. On the other hand, the average human can't. So unless you're a chameleon, there's absolutely no way you can focus on texting and driving at the same time. So don't do it, unless you're a chameleon.
Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Every moment counts if you're at risk or living with lung cancer. And anyone with lungs can get lung cancer. It causes more cancer deaths than breast, colon, and prostate combined. And while there may be moments where you question your next step, through it all, Go-To for Lung Cancer is here for you. We are your community. For screening, treatment, and survivorship support, Go-To is your go-to. Confronting lung cancer starts here. Visit goto.org.
In the early hours after the tsunami, it was ham radio that was on the air, saving lives. When Florida was ripped by hurricanes, the hams were there. In the critical moments after the attack of 9/11, it was the hams who coordinated emergency messages. When disasters strike, the hams are ready. Ham radio works when other communications don't. To learn how you can become a ham radio operator, call the ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, at 1-800-326-3942.
NewsNation invites you to spend Sundays on the Hill.
I am Chris Steyerwalt, and we are joined by a superb panel today.
The Hill Sunday with Chris Steyerwalt takes you inside the halls of Washington.
Here's the thing.
The Hill Sunday with Chris Steyerwalt, Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern on America's fastest-growing cable news network, NewsNation. You have a new home and a news network that respects all Americans. To find NewsNation, go to joinnn.com.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. VA provides free or low-cost health care to eligible veterans and covers everything. From preventative to specialty care, no one knows veterans better. Sign up at va.gov, call 1-800-MyVA411, or visit your nearest VA medical center. Come see why 90% of patients say they trust VA for their health care.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
I'll trust water bottles and a flashlight to save the day, but I'll be proved wrong.
With a tornado approaching, I'll realize that I lack a wheelchair-accessible shelter.
When the floodwaters rise, I'll be up in the attic with 20 cans of beans. It's a recipe for disaster.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Every child deserves the best teachers, facilities, and academic programs to set them up for success. At Milton Hershey School in Hershey, Pennsylvania, we make that a reality for children from qualifying families who are looking for greater opportunities. Milton Hershey School enrolls students from pre-K through 12th grade from across the United States to live and learn on a beautiful state-of-the-art campus with all costs covered. Are you looking to set your child up for success or know a child who could benefit from Milton Hershey School? Learn more at mhskids.org/admissions.
From Rolling Stone about the Trump administration, but is it true? Time now for Hot Mic with Mick. Here's the article. Trump's White House awash in speed and Xanax. One source even saying, quote, it was kind of like the Wild Wild West. Things were pretty loose. Whatever someone needs, we were going to fill this. To the former Trump White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney.
Now, ordinarily, when I see anything in Vanity Fair, The Atlantic, or The Rolling Stone about the Trump administration, I immediately throw it away because I know it's going to be crap. But this got a lot of attention, and I sent it to you over the weekend. I'm like, this is such crap. Can I say crap on television?
Yeah, you can.
You've done it twice.
For the record, you sent it to me, and I was like, if you want to talk about it, go for it. So here you go, brother.
Did the doc prescribe sleeping medicine? Yes. Did he prescribe Provigil? I took Provigil.
Yes,
I took Provigil.
What is it? What is
modafinil? It's a very low-level amphetamine, I believe. But it was given to we give it to B-52 bomber pilots, right, when they have to go on long missions to stay awake and to stay sharp. And it's very effective stuff. They gave it to me when I got off the airplane. I think we were in Vietnam after a 30-hour flight, and we had meetings that night. That's the appropriate use for this stuff. To suggest, and then when you fly home and you haven't slept in 4 days and you don't have any idea what time it is, that's the time you take Ambien or Lunesta or something like that. This is the appropriate use for these types of drugs. So to come out and say it was a wash in Xanax and modafinil.
Well, I was in the White House.
He wears jeans. I've always said he wears jeans, and I've always been skeptical of him, and now we have the fact.
But I was in the White House when I read this. I said, this is true because it was the same in our White House. I'm sorry, Mick. I believe the truth shall set you free. There was a lot of Doc Ronnie. He was prescribing Ronnie Jackson, who's now in Congress. He was prescribing a lot of drugs to people who were technically not on the list in our administration.
Not the doctor when I was there.
Okay, well, he was when I was there, and we had plenty of access to drugs.
Back to this headline.
SF-86.
No, it's fine. Back to this headline. Awash in speed and Xanax.
I don't
so that
know about.
Specifically, you would say what?
It's outrageous. It's absolutely false. I mean, keep in mind, say what you want about Donald Trump, and people will say a lot of different things about Donald Trump. The man cannot stand controlled substances. He does not drink. He does not do drugs. He would never tolerate it in his White House, period, end of story. That story is false.
Okay. All right, Mick, you've worn many hats.
Yes, I have. Apparently, drug dealer being one of them.
Founder of the Blockchain Caucus, one of them. So how about this? Bitcoin is now touching, it's close to an all-time high. I just looked at it. It's at 8,000. But this is the headline that caught my attention. Here it is. U.S. government owns $12 billion worth of Bitcoin. This is according to the crypto site Decrypt. The government possesses 194,000 Bitcoin, essentially, Mick, assets that were seized. They've made like $7 billion on this stuff.
While we're chatting, if they can bring that graphic back up again,
sure.
I'm going to make fun of you for just a second.
Okay, go for it.
We talk about the money as soon as it comes back. What the heck are you doing reading Decrypt magazine? I mean, what are you doing?
Berman means business. Berman means business.
They used to call me Triple D.
It's $12 billion. It's $12 billion, and we're talking off there. What that means in this town, it's a pot of money that can now be used as a pay for. I was doing the math during the ad. It's roughly 1/5 the size of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is where everybody goes in Washington when they want to pay for their new project. This pile of Bitcoin is now going to be, this is how I'm going to pay for my new federal program. We'll just sell it.
Why should they sell it?
They never will sell it. They just don't.
I actually don't agree that all of it's just here for the federal government. I think they're going to have to give money back that they seized to the FTX and, all these other companies that were seizing assets.
You remember the guy who lost his Bitcoin because it was like on a drive and it ended up in a trash dump? I just am curious about how they're going to seize this, but it is like this is an unregulated asset that's being traded and has actually made some people vulnerable. So I think some people in Congress need to learn something about it. I'm glad that Mick started someone who's going to learn something about it, but they should regulate it too.
They're going to spend.
All right, Bitcoin, by the way, is said to be a hedge for inflation while it continues to rip. Look at this headline in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, the skyrocketing costs driving cheeseburger prices up and restaurant owners out. What about this?
Well, that's the Wall Street Journal. You should be reading that. It's not Decrypt magazine.
Not Decrypt.
So.
What I looked at this, because I thought when I saw the headline, Blake, that it was all about the price of food, which obviously is a major issue, but this was not that. It was because of the price of workers.
Yeah, the price of labor. You're already seeing California replace a lot of, in restaurants, we have robots now making food, which is a whole change.
Where they just passed the law that says you have to pay $20 if you're in the fast food business to your workers, unless you make your own bread before September 15th of last year.
Because of the Panera carve-out, which you're saying. But
a huge donor to
and then you have to eat Panera. That's the other.
22 states are having their minimum wages raised, and it's just not.
It was hard.
This is what the problem is.
It was hard for independent businesses, small businesses, restaurant businesses before the pandemic. They got flooded with PPP money, and that helped them. But I think we're seeing a problem that has been growing before that.
All right. Meantime, a different all-time high. This might be the story of the weekend. History made at the University of Iowa.
You're not that tired. That wrist isn't tired. Caitlin Clark, the all-time leading scorer, major college basketball history.
What a star. That is Caitlin Clark, Iowa Hawkeyes guard, setting the record for NCAA Division I basketball's overall top scorer. I was going to ask you who you thought she might have broken.
I never would have guessed Pistol Pete.
Pistol Pete. Yeah. Pistol Pete Maravich. 50-year-old record. When you hear that call there, Caitlin Clark breaking the record.
I want to know who she's endorsing for the 2028 caucuses.
In Iowa, that's where your line goes?
It's a big endorsement. We'll see what's happening.
Women. Yeah, remember Nikki said her name wrong, and it was a huge...
Oh, my gosh, it was right.
God.
What did she call her? She called her Collins.
Caitlin
Collins. Yeah, the CNN.
It was a big deal.
Iowa women, though, setting records. Got to admire that.
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark, all-time leading scorer, pretty incredible. University
Did you
of
see
Iowa.
that one of the shots? She broke it on a free throw, but early in the game they showed a shot. She was 5 or 6 paces outside of the three-point stripe. I mean, the woman can make it from anywhere.
She shoots it from anywhere.
My son said she's good for a girl, and I had to sit him down.
She's good for her.
For sure.
I'm like, who is your mother?
Mistakes were made.
Good for an athlete.
Before we go around the table real quick, Super Tuesday tomorrow, thoughts?
Look, turnout, we'll be covering it. We'll be here. You should watch. But turnout is a big question. How much do Republicans still want to do this? How hardcore are the Haley people to still come out? I admire her toughness. I admire her moxie. She stayed in there in a difficult circumstance, but I don't know how many people are still going to come out.
Yeah, I just don't know. I think the question is, does Trump really go over the number, the 1215 or whatever it is by tomorrow?
Right.
I don't think so, but it's going to be close.
It's going to be close.
It's not.
He can't, even if he wins all of them tomorrow, he can't get quite.
It'll be right there. Yeah.
She's out by Wednesday, and Biden wins the Democrat.
We'll see.
You think Nikki Haley's out by Wednesday?
He thinks so.
Hold on. So you think she announces that she's out?
I think she cut a deal with her donors and said, "I will stay until Super Tuesday." But
let's see what happens. But I am watching the congressional races. California has a big Senate race. I actually have an episode of Press Advance where I gossip with some women who have worked with all these leaders about, including the Katie Porter seat is up for grabs, and it's a significant loss for Democrats if we lose that.
By the way, earlier in the show we were talking about the Supreme Court in Texas. Greg Abbott versus the feds. The Supreme Court, might they take it up? Brand new information on the other side of the break. The Supreme Court getting some news out of the High Court. Leland Vittert joins me, host of On Balance, when The Hill on NewsNation returns. Here to The Hill on NewsNation. So a little while ago, we told you about the new Texas law, which allows state authorities to arrest illegal immigrants inside that state line. Now, this just in from the Supreme Court tonight, as it has temporarily blocked that law at the request of the Justice Department. The Supreme Court has frozen an appeals court ruling allowing the law to go into effect. That new law is blocked until next week, allowing the 9 Supreme Court justices to determine what may or may not happen next. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. This is, we got a pretty big ruling regarding Donald Trump today, but in the state of Texas.
All those Trump-appointed justices again, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Look, finally we have a branch of government, and the highest part of that branch, meaning the Supreme Court, that is doing its job as the Constitution prescribed. And it's kind of interesting if on the same day you can issue a ruling that really irritates conservatives when it comes to Texas, okay, and at the same time you can issue a 9-0 ruling in favor of Donald Trump. Maybe we actually, we have one branch of government that deserves our respect.
We heard from Greg Abbott, the Texas governor, today about where he's deported illegal immigrants to. About 12,000 in D.C., 38,000 to New York, 32,000 to Chicago. He says about 105,000 overall.